Tenemos el honor de contar con la participación en esta
We are
ceremonia
honoured to have the
del
participation
Lehendakari
at
del
this
Gobierno
ceremony
Vasco, el
of the
excelentísimo
Lehendakari,
señor
President of the
Iñigo
Basque
Urkullu,
Government, Mr.
la
Iñigo
presidenta del
Urkullu,
Parlamento
the
Vasco,
Speaker of the
excelentísima
Basque
señora doña
Parliament,
Bakartxo
Mrs.
Tejeria,
Bakartxo
el
Tejeria,
alcalde de Bilbao,
the
excelentísimo
Mayor
señor
of
don Juan
Bilbao,
Mari
Mr.
Aburto,
Juan Mari
la presidenta
Aburto,
de las Juntas Generales de Vizcaya,
the President
excelentísima
of
señora doña
the
Ana
Provincial
Otadui,
Assembly of
y la diputada
Bizkaia,
foral,
Mrs. Ana
excelentísima
Otadui,
señora doña
and
Elisabete
the
Echanove.
Leader of the Provincial Council of Bizkaia, Mrs. Elisabete Echanove.
Hacen su entrada el Lehendakari, el alcalde, acompañados por el director de la Fundación BBVA,
and
don
the
Rafael
Mayor
Pardo.
come to the stage together with the Director of the BBVA Foundation, Mr. Rafael Pardo.
Accede ahora al escenario la presidencia de esta ceremonia.
And now the
Don Carlos Torres
presidency
Vila,
of this
presidente de la
ceremony.
Fundación
Mr. Carlos
BBVA y
Torres
del
Vila,
Grupo
President of the
BBVA, y
BBVA
la doctora
Foundation, the
Eloísa del
BBVA
Pino,
Group,
presidenta del
and
Consejo
Dr.
Superior
Eloísa
de
del Pino,
Investigaciones
President
Científicas.
of the Spanish National Research Council.
Hacen su entrada a continuación los
And now,
miembros de los
the
jurados de las
members
8
of the
categorías
juries
de la
of the
15ª
8
edición de los
categories
premios
of this,
Fronteras del
the
Conocimiento.
15th Frontier of Knowledge Awards, will now make their entrance.
A los 168 investigadores y
The
organizaciones
168 researchers and organizations recognized with the Frontiers of Knowledge Awards in the 14 previous occasions are joined today by the 18 honored in the 15th edition of the Frontiers Award for their fundamental contributions. We will find out more about that shortly. In the category of basic sciences, professors Paul Corkum, the University of Ottawa, Canada, Anne Ruilier, Lund University, Sweden, and Ferenc Krauss, the Max Planck Institute for Quantum Optics, Germany. In biology and biomedicine, Professor David Baker, University of Washington, Dr. Demis Hasabe and Dr. John Jumper, Deep Mind. In Information and Communication Technologies, Professor Alberto San Giovanni Vincentelli, the University of California at Berkeley. Ecology and Conservation Biology, Professors Susan Alberts, Duke University, Jean Altman, Princeton University, and Marlene Suk, University of Minnesota. Climate change. Professors James Zakas from University of California at Santa Cruz and Professor Ellen Thomas, University of California at Santa Cruz. Economics, Finance and Business Management, Professor Timothy Besley from the London School of Economics, Professor Torsten Persson from Stockholm University, and Professor Guido Tabellini from Bocconi University. Humanities and Social Sciences, Professor Steven Pinker from Harvard University and Professor Peter Singer from Princeton University. Music and Opera, Maestro Thomas Ades.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Thank you.
We sincerely thank all of you distinguished guests for taking part in this ceremony. The Frontiers of Knowledge Awards have their permanent HQ in Bilbao, the city in which the BBVA Group has its roots, and where it shares its history and its core values, such as its entrepreneurial spirit, its vocation to innovate in the service of people, its commitment to the preservation of the natural environment, and its openness to global society. We have the honour of having some welcoming words from the Mayor of Bilbao, Mr. Juan María Aburto. I invite you to take the stage.
Lehendakari jauna,
Mr. President, Chairman of the Basque Parliament, Chairman of the Assembly, President of the CSIC, and President or Chairman of the Foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening, everybody. On behalf of the Bilbao Town Council, I would like to welcome you warmly. Welcome to all of you people that have come from abroad. And once again, I would also like to thank the BBVA Foundation for having chosen Bilbao as the venue for the awards-giving ceremony. And as I said last year at this very event, knowledge symbolizes the maturity of mankind, and it's the antidote against extremism, and it's also the key to improve the world. And this edition of these awards has, as the main protagonists, has experts and people from all over the world that have maintained the flame of hope alive. So we know that they have worked to improve the life of peoples, and let's only hope that those war drums will stop being heard that are killing human lives and ruining countries. We know that a better world is possible because, in fact, there's no other alternative to that. Bilbao is very grateful to the BBVA Foundation for having come to our city to hold this award-giving ceremony. And on behalf of all of the citizens of Bilbao, I would like to welcome you people that have come from abroad to enjoy this awards-giving ceremony. This city that is very proud of its roots but is open to the future is thinking and acting with a global vocation, and we know that Bilbao is going to become the meeting point for some of the most brilliant minds of the world, whose work and dedication have made it possible to improve the life of everybody, addressing major social, economic and environmental challenges that we have to address as a civilization and as a species. And we are facing major uncertainties nowadays because we are now facing a critical time in our history in which it is more necessary than ever to talk about good news that will allow us to look towards the future with hope. And one of these good news is that there are people with major capabilities whose work in the world of science, in the area of research, ecology, climate change, economy, humanities or music is recognized every year by the Foundation through the Frontiers of Knowledge Awards.
Bilbao is delighted to today be hosting some of the most brilliant minds in the world, gathered here at the 15th BBVA Foundation Frontiers of Knowledge Awards ceremony. As mayor of this city that is proud of its roots but embracing of the future, I would like to warmly welcome you to Bilbao, home to these awards that are considered to be the prelude to the Nobel Prizes. We live in a time of great uncertainty. We are at the critical crossroads of our history. Good news that provides us with hope for the future is now more necessary than ever. These Frontiers of Knowledge Awards are good news because all the awards work to improve people's lives. I am one of those who believe that the world is continuing to advance despite the difficulties. It is true that new times bring new risks, such as those recently associated with the uncontrolled development of artificial intelligence. But to quote Steven Pinker, another of this year's Frontiers of Knowledge Awards winners, when rationality is deployed in the service of maximizing human well-being, that is what can drive progress. That sense of supportive rationality, along with our capacity for empathy and respect for diversity, and our ability to create beauty in the form of art, is what makes us really human, and what makes us feel that, indeed, another better world is going to be possible sooner rather than later. Yo soy de los que piensan que el mundo sigue avanzando.
And I'm one of those people that thinks that the world is advancing in spite of the difficulties, that putting our stakes on knowledge is like putting our stakes on people, on empathy, on solidarity, on social justice, and economic, social, and environmental sustainability. Because knowledge is like the maturity of mankind. It's the antidote against extremisms and the hope that another better world is going to be possible sooner than later. So, once again, I'm here in favor of the principle of fraternity so that we can recover mankind as an ethical category. And in the meantime, I prefer to believe in the utopia because sometimes reality is unbelievable. Once again, Carlos, President of the BBVA, thank you for coming to Bilbao. Thank you for holding this universal celebration of human knowledge. Thank you very much indeed, wholeheartedly. Thank you very much to the BBVA Foundation for having put their stakes on Bilbao as the venue for this universal celebration in favor of knowledge. And many thanks to all of you people too. Congratulations to all of the awardees for bringing such good news to improve the life of people. Thank you very much.
Eskerrik asko, alkate jauna.
Thank you very much, Mer Arbuto. The Frontiers of Knowledge Award, created 15 years ago, have 8 categories. 7 of them reflect the map of 21st century knowledge, namely basic sciences, biology and biomedicine, information technologies, climate change, ecology and conservation biology, economics, social sciences and humanities. What's more, artistic creation in the field of contemporary music and opera is also recognized. In all these fields, particularly significant advances carried out by one or more individuals are distinguished. The numerous nominations that are received every year, between 40 and 70 in each category, come from leading universities, research centres and cultural institutions around the world. In the pre-screening of the candidates and in the formation of the juries, the BBVA Foundation has the collaboration of Spain's leading public research institute, the Spanish National Research Council. Dr. Eloisa del Pino, president of this National Research Council, has done us the honour of co-chairing the ceremony, which is also attended by other members of her governing team, as well as leading researchers from the Council. We also have a broad representation of the juries who operate completely independently, applying the criteria of excellence specific to each field. They are a key part of the architecture of the awards, and I would appreciate a round of applause for them.
The
meaning of the Frontiers of Knowledge Awards is actually represented by an artistic symbol that you may well have seen, both in the video and in the programs. This is the work of the artist Blanca Muñoz. What they are, they're intertwining curved lines that suggest the dynamic interrelationship between different branches of science and culture, represented by the 8 categories of the awards. For yet another year, Bilbao has become the capital of knowledge and music. Citizens and their representative institutions welcome the winners of this, the 15th awards, and we thank them for it. We're going to project a video that will take us from Bilbao, home of the Frontiers of Knowledge Awards, to the working environments of our winners, located in universities and centres of reference in science, humanities and arts.
Carlos Torres Vila,
President of the BBVA Foundation, and Dr. Eloisa del Pino, President of the CSIC, are co-chairing this ceremony and will present the awards. The jury in the Basic Sciences category, chaired by Professor Theodor Hentz, has agreed to award the prize to Professor Anne Lhuillier, Professor Paul Korkum, and Professor Ferenc Kraus for seminal progress in the field of attophysics that have made it possible to observe and control the motion of electrons on the shortest timescale captured by humans. Professors Lhuillier, Korkum, and Kraus will now receive the prize.
En nombre de los tres galardonados, lee el discurso de aceptación la profesora
And on behalf of them, Professor Lhuillier will read an acceptance speech.
Members of the Presidency, authorities, committee members, fellow laureates, distinguished guests. Paul Korkum, Ferenc Kraus, and I are deeply honored to accept the BBVA Foundation Award for Basic Sciences. This prize rewards not only us, but also many scientists that have pushed our field forward step by step for more than 30 years. The motivation from the committee is for enabling subatomic particles to be observed in motion over the shortest timescale captured by science. That timescale is attosecond. Atto comes from the Danish language atten, which means 18. 1 attosecond is 10 to the power minus 18 second, or 1 billionth of a billionth of a second. Let me simply say that it is an incredibly short time. This field of research started about 35 years ago when physicists studied the light emitted by a gas of atoms exposed to an intense laser field, an experiment in which I had the privilege to participate. The emitted light was found to be composed of a series of high-order harmonics of the laser field, similar to a violin whose sound is never a pure note, but is accompanied by harmonics that contribute to the richness of the sound. These harmonics are almost synchronized and add together for a very short time of the order of 100 attoseconds. The physical reason for this short duration was explained a few years later with a clever, intuitive model proposed by Paul Korkum. Just at the turn of the millennium, individual attosecond pulses were experimentally generated and characterized in the group of Ferenc Kraus. What can we observe with these ultra-short light pulses? The smaller the particles, the faster the motion. Femtosecond pulses allow us to study the motion of atoms in molecules. Attosecond pulses allow us to follow the movement of electrons in atoms. The idea is to use attosecond light pulses like an ultra-short flash from a camera, making it possible to capture fast phenomena. However, as we know from quantum mechanics, an electron is both a particle and a wave. In our research, an electron behaves much more like a wave than a particle. Attosecond physics is about measuring the properties of this wave-like particle. This research is pursued today in many places around the world with applications in many different areas, from atomic physics to chemistry and condensed matter physics. Journalists often ask me, what is your research good for? Will attosecond science be useful to society? My honest answer is, I don't know, but I believe so. Can attosecond pulses help understand, possibly control, chemical processes useful for the green transformation that we so badly need? Possibly. I hope so. Can attosecond pulses help build tomorrow's computers that will be based on very small components? I think that will happen. It has started. Research in attosecond science has been and is still driven by curiosity, the wish to learn new things and push forward the frontiers of knowledge. Lasers were not invented to solve a problem. In fact, Theodor Meinmann, who built the first laser, called it a solution, seeking a problem. No need to describe here the huge impact that lasers have in our society, for example, in medicine or for communication. Attosecond pulses were not invented or developed to solve a specific problem. They were discovered out of curiosity. The future will tell us what impact on society they will have. My last remark is to the women listening to this speech. Standing here as a woman and accepting this wonderful award, I hope to contribute to inspiring other women to pursue their dream to do research in science. Research is truly fascinating. Eskerrik asko.
Thank you very much, Professors Julia, Kaufmann, and Kraus. The
Biology and Biomedicine jury, chaired by Angelika Schnicker, has agreed to award the prize to two converging contributions. On the one hand, David Baker, and the other, Dennis Hassabis and John Jumper, who have used advanced artificial intelligence tools to succeed in predicting the three-dimensional structure of proteins, as well as designing completely new proteins, thus opening the way to the development of new treatments for multiple diseases.
Escucharemos en primer lugar.
And we will first listen to Professor Baker's speech.
Members of the Presidency, authorities, committee members, fellow laureates, and distinguished guests. Proteins carry out essentially all of the important functions in our bodies and in all living things. They digest our food, fire our neurons, make molecules in our bodies, and allow us to move. While the proteins in and around us are incredible, they all evolved to solve problems that were important during evolution. For example, running away from predators or mediating the thought processes in our brains. We live in a very different world today. We are living longer, so new conditions like Alzheimer's disease are important. We are heating up and polluting the planet, so we need to find cleaner ways to generate energy and break down plastics and toxic compounds. We could wait for new proteins to evolve, but this would take many millions of years, and we don't have that kind of time. To address these new challenges, my colleagues and I have developed methods for designing completely new proteins that can solve these new problems. We are using these methods to develop cures for cancer, infectious disease, and more, and new advanced materials and technologies for a more sustainable tomorrow. The proteins in nature are encoded in the genes in our genomes and those of other living things. Once we have designed a brand new protein, we make a synthetic gene that encodes it. Since the protein is new, there is no corresponding gene in nature. We put this gene into bacteria, which then produce the designed protein. We can then extract the protein and test it to see if it does what we designed it to do and solve the problem that we wanted to solve. We have now designed and experimentally tested hundreds of thousands of brand new proteins that solve a very wide range of problems. One of these is already a clinically approved medicine. Others are on the way. Proteins are made of thousands of atoms, and we first designed proteins by seeking to accurately model the interactions between these atoms and how they direct the folding of the unique amino acid sequence of a protein to its final 3D structure. In the last several years, we have developed deep learning methods for protein design, which are much faster and more accurate. Both our older atomic interaction modeling approach, called Rosetta, and our newer deep learning design methods have been widely adopted around the world. The progress my team and our many collaborators worldwide have achieved to date has been the world of many hundreds of brilliant minds all working together. To them, I owe my deepest gratitude. This award is as much theirs as it is mine. To the BBVA Foundation and everyone present here today, thank you for this honor and your support. We promise to keep exploring and to keep sharing each and every day.
Thank you very much, Professor Baker. Interviene ahora el doctor.
And we will now hear from Dr. Jumper.
Members of the Presidency, authorities, committee members, fellow laureates, and distinguished guests, it is a great honor to accept the BBVA Frontiers of Knowledge Award on behalf of myself and Demis Hassabis for our work on protein structure prediction. This award represents the achievement of the whole AlphaFold team at DeepMind, whose creativity and ingenuity over several years are an enormous reason for AlphaFold's success. Determining protein structures, the repeatable, intricate, three-dimensional pattern of a protein's atoms in its natural environment, has been a central problem in biology for more than 60 years. By determining protein structures, we are able to better understand how proteins function, how genetic variations alter their function, and aid in the design of new proteins to serve our own purposes. Through painstaking development of experimental techniques, scientists worldwide have solved about 200,000 protein structures experimentally and deposited them in the protein data bank. The amount of work and time these structures represent is astounding, and determining a single experimental structure still takes months to years for skilled practitioners. Since nearly the beginning of the field, scientists have searched for theoretical or computational methods to predict a protein structure without having to use experiment. By the time that our team's work started on protein structure prediction, there had been a long history of methods developed to predict protein structure, and importantly, a very rigorous biennial assessment of the field in the CASP competition. The methods developed worked when the structure of a closely related protein was already known, but progress was slow in predicting the structure of proteins without known homologs. The fundamental challenge is that both the physical and evolutionary signals of protein structure are typically very weak, and methods must be extremely accurate to make experimentally useful predictions. While integrating machine learning tools into physical and evolutionary approaches had delivered accuracy improvements, the results were still far short of the atomic accuracy needed for most applications. The key innovations in our AlphaFold work were in showing how to build machine learning architectures and training procedures that were dramatically better adapted to understanding protein physics and evolution than standard machine learning techniques. The convolutional and standard transformer network architectures that had been previously used to try to learn protein structure had been developed in the context of learning images and text, respectively. It would have required many more structures than have been determined experimentally and are available in the protein data bank to learn protein structure with these unadapted techniques. By fusing our intuitions on protein biology into the design of the neural network, we were able to build architectures that learn protein structure about 100 times more efficiently than previous methods in terms of the data required to achieve the same accuracy. The result is a deep learning system that predicts protein structures with a median error of less than an angstrom, less than the diameter of an atom. The release of AlphaFold 2 years ago created an explosion of applications throughout the structural biology community, from understanding of basic biology and evolution to therapeutics and vaccines. Scientists have been able to use AlphaFold in conjunction with other experimental techniques to understand the structure and function of some of the largest and most complex molecular machines of the cell, such as the nuclear pore, which controls what can come in and out of the nucleus. Another incredible development is how AlphaFold and related techniques have been used to aid protein engineering, as the incredible work that you heard about from David, to develop new proteins for therapeutic purposes, both small proteins and large systems such as a molecular syringe for targeted delivery of protein therapeutics with potential applications to cancer therapy. It is exciting to see every day the breadth of science that has been enabled or accelerated by accurate protein structure prediction. On behalf of Dr. Hassabis and myself, we are deeply honored to accept this award. I want to close by saying that we think we have taken a significant step into the era in which the study of molecular biology will become more computational and ultimately more predictive, enabling us to find new cures for disease and engineer new solutions to some of life's most pressing problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Giampa.
The jury in the Information and Communication Technologies category, chaired by Professor Jos van der Walle, has agreed to award the prize to Professor Alberto San Giovanni Vincentelli for transforming chip design from an artisan process to the automated semiconductor industry that makes today's electronic devices possible. Professor Alberto San Giovanni Vincentelli, please come up and receive your award. And let's hear now Professor San Giovanni Vincentelli's speech.
Members of the Presidency, authorities, committee members, fellow laureates, distinguished guests, I am honored to receive the BBVA Foundation Frontiers of Knowledge Award for my contribution to the automation of semiconductor chip design. This is a process that took over 30 years of work of many people, which together with manufacturing technology has made it possible to go from chips that contained only a few hundreds transistors in the 1970s to today's devices featuring tens of billions of transistors, a 9 orders of magnitude increase, a very large number as compared to this very small number that we heard about before. The strategic importance of semiconductor design and manufacturing cannot be overestimated. Chips are pervasive. Everyday objects are powered by chips, from cars to airplanes, from medical devices to smartphones. Perhaps most importantly, these chips drive computing systems that make it possible to store and manipulate an enormous quantity of data. Artificial intelligence would be simply impossible without semiconductors. The multi-billion chip acts intended to sustain semiconductor design and production form a fundamental part of the industrial strategies of countries stretching from the United States to Europe, to India, and beyond, attesting to the vital importance of this sector to the economy and defense at large. The design of semiconductors with billions of transistors is impossible without the help of sophisticated algorithms and software tools that automate, at least in part, the design process. My research journey in this topic started in the 1970s when I joined the University of California, Berkeley, from Politecnico di Milano, my alma mater. At that time, I was a theoretician at heart. I was interested in algorithms for the solution of large-scale systems of equations. In fact, my first contribution was indeed in speeding up the simulation process, that is, the analysis of physical systems by computer modeling. The key to this acceleration was in relaxation-based algorithms, techniques that I developed together with my great friend and partner in crime, Richard Newton, who should have been with me today sharing this award. Richard, unfortunately, left us in 2007 after a short illness, and his departure left a huge void in our field and in our hearts. In the 1980s, I became interested in other areas of semiconductor design, such as the optimal layout of transistors and wires on a plane, and the optimal realization of design expressed at high-level languages with logic gates, a process called logic synthesis. While simulation was essential in verifying the correctness of a design, without the need for prototyping this design, automatic layout and logic synthesis made it possible to speed up chip design by orders of magnitude, at the same time eliminating errors in the process. My interest in these fields came in the 1980s during my visit to the IBM Watson Research Center, where I collaborated with extraordinary individuals such as Bob Brayton, who should be credited for fundamental contribution to logic synthesis. We at Berkeley always placed our algorithms and computer programs in the open domain. We felt strongly that allowing others to leverage our work freely and to verify our theories with their implementation was essential to advance the field. In 1983, Pat Gelsinger, now Intel CEO, asked me to help design the Intel 386 microprocessor using the tools that I developed. This was an important milestone in the wide use of electronic design automation, or EDA. In 1983, Richard Newton and I co-founded SDA, which later became Cadence, and in 1987, Synopsys, both with the financial help of semiconductor companies. They are now each worth more than $60 billion on NASDAQ. I believe that the staying power of these companies, which are still growing at a fast pace after almost 40 years, is due to fundamental results in our research. Design is the process of bringing to life abstract ideas and concepts via their successive refinement towards a physical realization. It is indeed a science in its own right. Design should be considered a science. Automating the mundane parts of design, as we did for electronic design, empowers engineers in all fields to explore a much larger solution space in a much shorter time. Since 1989, I have been extending this paradigm of design to other fields such as vehicle design, building design, and even synthetic biology and drug discovery. Once you have a hammer, everything does look like a nail. Applications were essential in my research. The inspiration came from identifying difficult problems that engineers in industry faced, finding a way of formalizing them, and developing algorithms for their solution. Finding the right formulation is the most important step, whereby limiting the freedom of designers has been fundamental to the development of electronic design automation, allowing to frame a design problem into a solvable mathematical problem. A design methodology is, in our lingo, about freedom from choice. While physicists unveil the laws of nature, engineers create their own world that in the end has to come to terms with physical reality. We are limited in our invention by laws of nature. In conceiving ideas and bringing them to life, we need to take into consideration ethics, ensuring that our creation do not bring harm to humans or the environment. In this refinement process, I was always fascinated by the role of time, which brings me to the influence that philosophy has had on my scientific work. At the beginning of a design process, physical time is often not part of the equation. We use causality to determine the dependency of various processes that take place in our inventions. Then this order refines until it is embedded in physical reality, and it becomes physical time. As Kant wrote, time and space are categories of man. They do not exist in the abstract. I am convinced that a solid scientific and technical education cannot forget the humanities. Many mistakes made in the development of technological systems could have been avoided if we had paused to think about their broader implication. Finally, I would like to acknowledge the wonderful environment that the University of California, the companies I work with, my colleagues and PhD students have created, and recognize with enormous gratitude the love and support that my family and friends who are in the audience today have given me over the years. And I mean support in the Italian term sopportare, which means they had to bear with me for all this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Sangiovanni Vincentelli.
The jury in the Ecology and Conservation Biology category, chaired by Professor Emily Bernhardt, has agreed to award the prize to Professors Susan Alberts, Professor Jean Altman, and Professor Marlene Suk for their contributions to the behavioral and evolutionary ecology of animals, incorporating a variable of animal social behavior into species conservation plans. Professor Alberts will read the acceptance speech on behalf of the three laureates.
Members of the Presidency, authorities, committee members, fellow laureates, and distinguished guests. I'm delighted to accept this award on behalf of myself and the two other laureates for the category of Ecology and Conservation Biology, Professor Jean Altman and Professor Marlene Zuck. We're all deeply grateful to the BBVA Foundation and the Spanish National Research Council for the recognition of the fundamental importance of both science and cultural creation for our society and our lives. We're also grateful to the committee, including Drs. Emily Bernhardt, Maria Begoña Garcia, Paul Brakefield, Pedro Jordano, Joanna Lambert, and Rick Leemans, and we're humbled by being the recipients of this recognition. The citation for our award refers to our outstanding contributions to the behavioral and evolutionary ecology of animals. I'll briefly mention those contributions now. Professor Altman and I worked together on one of the longest-running studies of wild primates in the world, the baboons of the Amboseli Basin in southern Kenya. Professor Altman began this research in 1971 with her husband Stuart Altman, and by the time I graduated from college 12 years later, she was already a legend in behavioral ecology for her contributions to methodological rigor and to our understanding of the intimate connections between social behavior on the one hand and how animals, and by extension humans, survive and reproduce on the other. This connection lies at the heart of the problem of how wild animal populations will persist in a rapidly changing world. Together, Professor Altman and I and our colleagues have sought to push the boundaries of knowledge about how non-human primates, and by extension we humans, navigate the complex social and physical landscapes in which we live. We hope that this knowledge has contributed to our understanding of how to conserve these animals. Professor Zuck, too, was nearly a legend by the time I graduated from college, even though she's only a couple of years older than me, because as a graduate student, she developed one of the most important and famous hypotheses in evolutionary biology. The Hamilton-Zuck hypothesis, named after Professor Zuck and her mentor and collaborator William D. Hamilton, states that genetic variation in a population, essential for populations to persist, can be maintained if females are able to detect and choose males who have strong immune systems. This hypothesis has generated volumes of downstream research from hundreds, if not thousands, of researchers, and has led to large increases in our knowledge about how the immune system, morphology, and behavior co-evolve. Since this very first contribution, Professor Zuck has continued to be at the forefront of knowledge with her research on how sexual traits evolve. And furthermore, she's been an outspoken and inspiring advocate for women in science and has had a huge positive influence on many in the field, including me. None of us would be here today without the help and support of many people. We're all very grateful to our home institutions, Duke University, Princeton University, and the University of Minnesota. We also owe a deep debt of gratitude to the U.S. National Science Foundation and the National Institutes of Health, who have supported our research for decades. Our families and friends have provided love and support through many days, months, years, and frequent absences from home while we pursued our research dreams. And in my case, I've been personally, continually inspired by the examples of my daughters, Michelle and Teresa Zimmerman, who have unconditionally loved and supported me even when they missed me, and who have grown into remarkable, admirable adults, in spite of the fact that my attention was often elsewhere. Finally, I know how deeply honored all three of us feel to have worked with the brilliant students and collaborators who made possible the research that we three are being recognized for today. It takes a village to do science, and all of us have reveled in and been humbled by the particular scientific villages we've had the honor to inhabit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professors Alberts, Altman, and Zuck.
The jury in the climate change category, chaired by Professor Bjorn Stevens, has agreed to award the prize to Professors James Zakos and Ellen Thomas for their contributions to the discovery of a 56-million-year-old greenhouse effect that predicts the impacts of current human-induced global warming. The prize is awarded to Professors Zakos and Thomas.
En nombre de los dos galardonados, lee el
And
discurso de
Professor
aceptación.
Ellen
La
Thomas will
profesora
read the
Ellen
acceptance
Thomas.
speech on behalf of the two laureates.
Members of the Presidency, authorities, committee members, fellow laureates and distinguished guests. My co-laureate Jim Zakkers and I feel deeply honored and highly appreciative that the BBVA Foundation has awarded our research focused on events that happened 56 million years ago in the category of climate change, implying relevance to today's world. For most of my career, I sought at the study of microscopic fossils of organisms called foraminifera, which live in the largest but least known habitat on Earth, the deep sea floor, was fascinating. It is fascinating to me, but without any practical relevance to society. Even when collaborating with colleagues such as my co-laureate, analyzing their minuscule shells for information on the environments in which those shells grew, information such as temperature or pH or oxygen levels. I was wrong here. I was very wrong. Insights gained from studying those now lost worlds of the past add materially to understanding our present and future world, with its complex cycles involving life forms that are interacting biologically and chemically in a world that is warming due to greenhouse gas emissions. Climate models extrapolate from the recent past into the near future, but data on our long past worlds, collected by many colleagues and students globally, document actual integrated examples of what happened on Earth during past greenhouse warming, enabling us to see what our future could look like, not only in a few decades from now into the future, but even extending into evolutionary timescales. These records show that the problems for humanity caused by fossil fuel burning include not just warming, but a multitude of direct and indirect environmental consequences of greenhouse gas emissions. We humans have been emitting those gases at scales and rates that lead to ocean acidification as well as warming. And such warming then leads to increased activity of the hydrological cycle. That means droughts and floods. Polar regions warm most, and combined with changing intensity and patterns of precipitation, this so-called polar amplification can lead to changing ocean circulation at surface and at depths, triggering and directing poleward migration of countless organisms at different rates, thus affecting ecological interactions and ocean productivity, with feedbacks again to climate. It is a pleasure to speak here in Bilbao because it is here in Basque Country that we see the best geological sections anywhere in the world providing evidence of this global warming 56 million years ago. Then there was a 1,000-meter deep ocean where now the beach is at Zumaya, that famous dragon-tooth beach in a famous TV series. And this is about 75 kilometers east of here. From there, we travel east for another 400 kilometers to the Tremp-Grau's Basin in the southern Pyrenees, and there these deep waters graded into shallower seas and then onto land. There, our colleagues from the University of the Basque Country were the first to document a dramatic increase in the seasonality of rainfall, with autumn rainstorms and severe floods causing erosion and landslides. At Zumaya, our nominator, Laia Alegret, documented deep-sea extinctions, while yet other colleagues documented a decline in core algal reefs in the shallow seas at Tremp. So here in Basque Country, we can correlate the past, the present, and the future. Recognition of past episodes of rapid warming due to greenhouse gas emissions could lead to the question, why should we worry about global warming if Earth has cycled through climate changes from much warmer to much colder than today, over millions to billions of years of its existence? This question is not well considered. Research of past warming events serves to show a global integrated whole of consequences of greenhouse gas emission that includes warming, changing precipitation patterns, changing ecosystems, extinction and sea level rise. Climate change is no problem for Earth. There is too much hubris in us humans in saying that we must save the Earth. Earth will be just fine, as it has been, over hundreds of millions of years. But we, the people, our children and grandchildren, will not be fine. It is our houses and roads and our railways, our cities close to the sea, as in my native Netherlands, our patterns of agriculture that will not be sustainable. So I will conclude by thanking once more for this award and saying that I can only hope that we truly learned from looking at microscopic fossils from the deep oceans, so that we learn not to save the Earth, which we cannot do, but to save ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professors Seikos and Thomas.
The Economic, Finance and Business Management jury, chaired by Professor Eric Maskin, has agreed to award the prize to Professors Timothy Besley, Torsten Bersen and Guido Tabellini for making political economy a modern, empirical and disciplinary science by illuminating, on the one hand, how political institutions and processes shape economic policies and economic outcomes, and on the other hand, how economic factors affect political institutions. Professors Besley, Bersen and Tabellini, please come and receive your prize.
On behalf
of the three laureates, we're going to hear a speech delivered by Professor Pearson.
Members of the Presidency, authorities, committee members, fellow laureates, distinguished guests. Does the level and composition of public spending depend on how a country's government is appointed or how its legislators are elected? Which economic forces and political forces pin down a state's capacity to tax its citizens or provide them with different services? Tim Besley, Guido Tabellini, and I get this year's award for research on hard questions like these at the crossroads of economics and politics. It's an honor and privilege to speak for all of us. Now, being PhD students and young economists in the 80s and 90s, early 90s, we ran into two kinds of shifts that would greatly sway our research. First, we saw our own discipline change. So game theory produced new and powerful instruments to probe strategic interactions, like market competition among firms or electoral competition among parties. Further, empirical research became much sharper as new quasi-experimental tools and practices were spreading from labor economics to other fields. In fact, previous BBVA awards have recognized both of these developments. But second, and importantly, we saw widespread real-world mess-ups in economic and political affairs. So Sweden grappled with high inflation, a devaluation cycle, and large recurring government deficits. Italy was rocked by repeated government crises, while its public debt was rising from 30 to 120% of GDP in 25 years. And the UK suffered mounting social strains as the government tried to clamp down inflation from a 25% peak. So it seemed lame to see such episodes as random policy mistakes, but systematic explanations didn't really exist. So inspired by these real-world problems, I wrote some early papers with Lars Svensson and others on credible monetary and fiscal policies and on the political roots of government deficits. Guido worked on related issues together with Alberto Alesina. Actually, Alberto might have shared our award here today, but for his premature death just 3 summers ago. Meanwhile, Tim was analyzing choices of policies and selection of politicians with Steve Coate and Anne Case. Now, of the contributions cited by the committee, let me just bring up 2 specific research contributions, one joint with Guido, one joint with Tim. So our early work had stressed how voters who care about government services or redistribution choose among politicians who are the ones who will choose these policies. But then the rules of the political game should be critical because they shape the choices by both politicians and by voters. So following this logic, Guido and I tried to uncover how constitutional rules map into economic policies. So our simple game theory models predict that lawmakers that are elected by proportional representation, rather than first past the post, tax and spend more overall, especially on broad programs such as Social Security. And quasi-experimental estimates in the data square well with these hypotheses. So with proportional elections and everything else equal, the GDP share of total public spending is about 5% higher, and of Social Security about 2% higher. Likewise, in the theory, presidential governments spend more than parliamentary ones. In the data, levels are truly lower by some 5% of GDP. Now, in that work, we treated the constitutional rules as given, at least in the theory. But in a bigger picture, political institutions are, of course, chosen or built over time. So we would like to investigate the drivers of that process. So Tim and I took this next step in our research on effective states. So our studies span the state's capacities to collect tax revenue, to support private markets, and to provide collective services. Now, because investments in any of these 3 state dimensions augment the incentives to invest in the other 2, state capacities should develop jointly, and their economic and political drivers should be the same. Indeed, clusters of strong states and clusters of weak states stand out very clearly in data, whether we look at histories of today's developed nations or we look at broad cross-sections of current nations. Moreover, in our theory and in data, development clusters more broadly. Stronger states are not only stronger, they are richer and less violent than weaker states are. To conclude, it's just awesome to share this award with Guido and Tim. They are terrific scholars and close friends. We are jointly very grateful to the BBVA Foundation and the Prize Committee for honoring political economics, and to all other researchers, including those that I mentioned, who helped advance this field. But our deepest thanks go to our families for their unconditional and unwavering support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professors Beardsley, Person, and Tabellini.
The jury in the category of music and opera, chaired by Maestro Pedro Halfter Caro, has agreed to award the prize to Thomas Ades for his extraordinary communicative capacity of his music, which reinterprets Western musical tradition in a catalogue that embraces all genres and connects transversely with diverse audience all over the world. Maestro Ades will receive this award.
Escuchemos el discurso del maestro Ades.
Thank you. Members of the Presidency, authorities, committee members, fellow laureates, distinguished guests, I'm deeply grateful for this award, and I'm amazed to find myself standing here on this stage with so many truly extraordinary people who seem probably to be actually saving the world. I merely make music, so I thought I'd try to explain, if not why, at least how this has happened. I don't remember my first steps, nor my first notes on the piano, sitting next to my father. He says now that after he showed me a few tunes, I quickly pushed him off the piano stool. What I do remember is feeling there was something hidden in the sounds, a garden, a building, mine to look for. I told myself I was too busy with homework and television to find this secret place. But one day something changed, everything changed. I was sitting on the sofa in our house, in our playroom, watching TV with my brother. We'd probably been there for over an hour. I suddenly had a vague feeling of wasting my time and my gifts when I suddenly felt fluttering. Was I ill? I was about 15. Was I having a heart attack? No. I ran to my mother saying there's something wrong with my heart. There wasn't. Over 10 years later, it happened again in the middle of writing an orchestral piece, a Sila. I took myself to hospital, and that's where I learned about panic attacks. So these two things were connected. And even before that, I sensed that this feeling of panic was caused by something like an obstacle, like a ganglion or a knot in my way, in my path, which I could only remove by untying it, by changing the order. It was a tangle of sounds so dense that it was like every sound in a single moment. I soon found that these were actually pieces of music waiting to be untangled, and the piece of music was the result. I started to unravel them by making music. I learned then that others also heard this as music and might be as affected by it as I was. At the same time, I discovered the power of music, as great as nature to me, the greatest of all powers, a power I suddenly found in music of the past, in Beethoven, Sibelius, Janacek, Stravinsky, Messiaen, Kate Bush. I came to find that composing, which I believed ridiculously necessary to my physical survival, could also give me access to this power. It became my one purpose in life to do whatever I could to release that power into the world. But how? So I played obsessively the masters of the past to learn their secrets, and I learned also that times change, but the problems in many ways remain the same when you're faced with a blank sheet of paper. As I worked, I instinctively avoided ideologies. I still mistrust theoretical dead ends. If I have, as this award so generously proposes, extended frontiers, it's just a result of activities I thought necessary for my own survival. I have more or less laboriously pursued my inclinations and ignored voices mandating what music should or shouldn't be, in their opinion. It's especially pleasing to me that this recognition comes from here in Spain, a land of explorers, country of visionaries. Bilbao was, as it happens, the first place on earth I laid eyes on beyond Great Britain, the island of my birth. The vision of this place, this horizon, so different as it was from the city of today, was an inspiration to the boy on the prow of that ferry in 1976. I was 5. Since then, Spanish art and culture have often been an inspiration to me. In fact, from the influence of Spanish music and traditional culture in Living Toys, which I wrote when I was 22, through The Conquistador in America, Prophecy, in 2000, to Luis Buñuel's film The Exterminating Angel, El Ángel Exterminador, which was the basis for my third opera. My mother, Dawn Ades, is an expert in surrealism, so I really grew up with Dali and Buñuel, and the paradoxes of Buñuel's work are part of life for me. Buñuel called The Exterminating Angel his black pearl. Elegant society is trapped in a house for no reason. It's a philosophical mise en abîme, a delicious challenge to a composer, forcing one to cut to the bone. Why does any character do or sing anything? So Buñuel, to finish, this great figure of Spanish culture, banned from Spain for 30 years effectively, pushed me in my efforts to stave off my ever-threatening heart attack, so-called, to find a musical America of my own, a new world guided by temperament but also by something beyond me. I'm grateful to that mysterious force, to its freedom, but also the compulsions it has given me, and to the BBVA Foundation for allowing me to continue on my path. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maestro Ades. The
Humanities and Social Sciences jury, chaired by Professor Carmen Iglesias, has agreed to award the prize to Steven Pinker for his transformative contributions in the field of rationality and the workings of the mind, and to Professor Peter Singer for expanding the domain of the moral sphere by grounding the moral criteria of our relationship with animals. Both laureates have had a tremendous impact in the public sphere. Professors Pinker and Sphere will now receive their prizes.
Escucharemos en primer lugar el discurso.
And first we will hear from Professor Singer.
Members of the Presidency, authorities, committee members, fellow laureates, distinguished guests. I am delighted to receive the BBVA Foundation Frontiers of Knowledge Award in the Humanities. I thank the Foundation and all those involved in this award for their support of the humanities. It is particularly apt that I'm sharing this award with Steven Pinker. We don't agree on everything, but we share some extremely important beliefs. First, that seeking evidence and applying our ability to reason is the only reliable way to gain knowledge and to make progress towards a better world. Second, we oppose the narrowing of public debate that has succeeded in denying platforms to some thinkers with controversial views. Regrettably, some university administrations have bowed to uninformed campaigns, disciplining, suspending, and in some cases, even dismissing their own academic staff. For this reason, I have, together with Francesca Minerva and Jeff McMahon, co-founded the Journal of Controversial Ideas, a peer-reviewed, open-access academic journal that allows authors to publish under a pseudonym, if they so desire,
and will not refuse to publish articles because they are controversial. When Animal Liberation was first published in 1975, it was greeted with hostility and even ridicule. Hence, it is gratifying to have my work on animals recognised, as it is in the BBVA Foundation citation, as providing a basis for extending ethics to animals. I believe that, just as we now reject the blatant racism of Europeans during the era of slavery and the overt sexism of men over women until quite recent times, so we should reject the ideology of speciesism that allows us ruthlessly to exploit non-human animals. We need to recognize speciesism as an ideology that serves what we regard as our own interests, but at an enormous cost to the hundreds of billions of animals we exploit. Animals were not put here on Earth for us to use, and there is no reason why all humans should have rights, for example, the right not to be tortured, but animals should be denied them. The only defensible ethical principle for governing our relations with other sentient beings is one of equal consideration for similar interests. Pain is pain, no matter the species of the one who is experiencing it, and we are not justified in ignoring or discounting it because it is not the pain of a member of our species. The citation also refers to my work as having major consequences for international animal welfare legislation, as well as for moral progress. In Animal Liberation Now, published this month, I review the progress that has been made for animals over the past 50 years. In the European Union, including, of course, here in Spain, it is now illegal to crowd hens into bare wire cages in which they cannot spread their wings. Similarly, veal calves and pigs can no longer be held in individual stalls, too narrow for them even to turn around. This is progress, but no form of industrial animal production that confines animals indoors all their lives and breaks up their family bonds gives them an adequate life. Regrettably, factory farming is still growing in some countries, and especially in China, with catastrophic consequences for animals, the climate, and the environment more generally. There is still a great deal of work to be done to protect animals. I hope that Europe will continue to move forward in its protection of animals and will set an example for other countries to follow. In conclusion, I would like to return to the humanities, and in particular to the branch of humanities in which I work, namely philosophy. Philosophy is a remarkable discipline. It is well known that it teaches people to think more clearly, and that this is a skill that is useful in many areas of life. But philosophy, or more specifically ethics, can do much more than that. Over the years, I have received hundreds of emails from people telling me that my work has changed their lives. Some have changed their career plans in order to do more to assist people living in extreme poverty. Others have changed what they eat, no longer eating meat or ceasing to eat any animal products. One or two of them have even donated a kidney to a complete stranger. Is there any other area of study that can have such a profound effect on the lives of those who take part in it? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Singer. Interviene ahora el
And we will now
Pinker.
hear from Professor Pinker.
Members of the Presidency, authorities, committee members, fellow laureates, distinguished guests. I hope that the stupendous honor of this award, which I accept with humility and gratitude, will call attention not to me, but to the Enlightenment ideal that has animated my thinking, namely that if we apply reason to the goal of improving human flourishing, we can gradually succeed. It is, I've argued, a humane and practicable alternative to destructive ideologies that try to find meaning in strong leaders, national glory, tribal purity, or struggle among racial and sexual identity groups. An agenda for humankind would seem like a grandiose suggestion from a cognitive scientist. But the Enlightenment philosophes were insightful psychologists, and they noted that our institutions are ultimately reflections of human nature. My own intellectual journey began with experiments on the psychology of auditory perception, visual imagery, and language. These topics raise deeper questions, like how do we acquire knowledge? What are the innate mental mechanisms that allow us to learn? Is the mind organized into distinct faculties? I tried to answer such questions with the idea that the mind is an evolved system of organs of computation that allowed our ancestors to understand and master their physical and social worlds. I soon discovered that claims about how the mind works, rooted in biology, are not just scientific hypotheses, but magnets for controversy. In The Blank Slate, I explored the moral, political, and emotional baggage associated with human nature, and why the alternative doctrine that we are blank slates has had such historical appeal. My response was inspired in no small part by my fellow honoree Peter Singer, as well as the philosopher in my family, my intellectual and life partner Rebecca Neuberger-Goldstein. A progressive agenda is fully compatible with the idea of a rich human nature, which includes our faculty of sympathy, whose circle of inclusion can be expanded over the course of history by education and cosmopolitanism, and by our faculty of reason. As Spinoza wrote, those who are governed by reason desire nothing for themselves which they do not also desire for the rest of humankind. As a social scientist, I tried to back up the hypothesis of an expanding circle with data. I amassed a collection of graphs that plotted measures of violence over time, such as war, homicide, slavery, and the abuse of women and children, each snaking downward from the top left to the bottom right. They contradict our impression that the world is increasingly violent, a cognitive illusion arising from the fact that journalism feeds us the worst things happening on a given day, and our habit of misestimating probability from available images and stories. I tried to explain these trends with the help of a phrase from Abraham Lincoln, the better angels of our nature. Though the human mind harbors inclinations to violence, particularly dominance, revenge, sadism, and exploitation, it also includes faculties that counteract them, such as self-control, morality, cognition, and sympathy. I soon discovered that other measures of well-being have also improved over the course of history, including longevity, prosperity, education, safety, and leisure. The ideal of progress is not a matter of optimism or idealism, but a demonstrable empirical fact. It is by no means inevitable. The laws of nature are indifferent to our well-being, but depends on whether we continue to apply reason to improve human flourishing. Adding to the incredulity that progress has happened is a cynicism that reason could possibly have propelled it. According to a popular view, human cognition is a bag of reflexes that leave us eternally vulnerable to biases and illusions. But this goes too far. Though we are indeed fallible creatures, we have honed our reasoning with tools like logic, probability, and the scientific method, and can correct each other's fallacies through open criticism and debate. This underscores the necessity of the currently beleaguered principles of freedom of speech and inquiry. I thank the Foundation for this honor and close with a hope expressed by Anton Chekhov: humanity will become better when you show it what it is like. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Pinker.
Our congratulations and thanks go to all of the laureates. And on behalf of the CSIC, a partner institution of the Frontiers of Knowledge Awards, the president of the CSIC, Dr. Luisa del Pino, will now take the floor. Mr. President, Speaker of the Basque Parliament, Mayor of Bilbao, President of the Assembly of Vizcaya, President of the BBVA Foundation de Carlos, Director of the Foundation, Mr. Rafael, authorities of the Basque Government, of the Provincial Government of Vizcaya, and of the Government of Spain in the Basque Country, members of our jury, laureates. The works and biographies of those laureates in this 15th Frontiers of Knowledge Awards invite us to think this year, perhaps more than ever, about this very complex relationship, such a human relationship, which is the one that exists between emotion and reason. It's thanks to the findings of many of the laureates this year that we've learned that reason allows us to broaden our ability to show empathy, to achieve moral goals that are also emotional goals, such as seeking the progress of humankind, peace, the eradication of poverty, equality of opportunities, or to avoid the suffering of other sentient beings. What's more, the laureates have made us understand that to achieve any purpose as an individual or even as a part of a society, we need to take certain conscious choices. It's not just a matter of choosing our goals. No, we also need to be very careful and very daring regarding the means that we use to achieve those aims. We need to have institutions and public policies that encourage behaviors such as cooperation and goodness, and that encourage our ability to reason. The truth is, right in the middle of an energy and climate crisis, after a pandemic, with the return of these extremist, intolerant ideologies, and that are out of place where we are with the progress of AI, we've once again realized that the main ultimate goal that's always been given to science, which is the rational dominion of the notion of the world, is just a chimera. Many of us think that it's actually very concerning that we are aware of the fact that in the 21st century we're still a long way of this human aspiration, not so much to control, but just to understand the world. And yet, thanks to many of these laureates who state that their optimism regarding human progress is evidence-based, makes us realize that we should have hope. We must have hope, because we've seen that humankind is still carrying on to try to achieve the limits that we can do, and using at the same time science both as a tool and as a means. It's true that if we look at the work of all our laureates, we should really look to the future with hope, because they've all taken on board the difficult task of trying to find some kind of sanity in this mad world. Attophysics is already helping us look into nature. Artificial intelligence is going to revolutionize design of proteins and therefore of medicine. Algorithmic design of circuits is also going to enable us to concentrate on what makes us human, which is our creativity. We now know that social interaction or climate control is very key for many sentient buildings. and the political and institution structure that many countries have has a lot to do with structures, that is, in how governments distribute resources in their societies. In addition to these discoveries, we can also be optimistic because science, to a large extent, is a result of a very powerful emotion. We can't leave it to one side. We can't overlook it. We could all have the insight that in the scientific sphere, the emotion of a scientist comes along on many occasions before their reasoning. Once they then apply reasoning, and maybe after a lot of time and dedication, it's then when they suddenly feel this satisfaction of understanding and of having met their curiosity. As a society, we could also become enthusiastic about the promises offered by science, for example, the possibility of discovering who we truly are or how our world really operates. We can convert these emotions into the driving force that moves us as a society towards making use of science. But if there's something we have learned from the Lorentzians, there's no such thing as serendipity, even though we'd like to think so. In fact, science requires emotions, but it also requires reasoning and conscious political decisions and of political and public support structures. Thanks to the BBVA Foundation for forming part of this structure that supports science and for having allowed us to offer the support on this adventure. Thanks to the governments that face negationism. Thanks for all those laureates for having actually delighted us with their music, for having challenged us with what is both simple and sophisticated, and for not having allowed us to just sit back and rest on a comfortable moral. Thanks for having tried to solve these problems that are both social and scientific, such as the fight against disease, conservation of biodiversity, appropriate distribution of wealth, and even democratic stability. And thanks for trying to broaden the frontiers of human knowledge. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, doctora Del Pino.
Thank you very much, Dr. Del Pino. I'm now going to hand the floor to Mr. Carlos Torres Vila, who's president of the BBVA Foundation.
Linda Cari, Speaker of the Basque Parliament and Mayor of Bilbao, Chairperson of the Assembly of Vizcaya, dear authorities, rectors, Chairperson of the CSIC, Director of the BBVA Foundation, trustees, members of the jury, laureates. Good afternoon, everybody, or good evening, rather. Good evening, everybody. It's a great pleasure and honor for me to be here tonight amongst you. So once again, we are back in Bilbao, which is the permanent venue for our awards to celebrate the 15th edition. And these awards show how valuable science and culture are as an essential pillar to address the major challenges of our time. The ceremony this year is especially exciting because we are here to celebrate our 15th anniversary. So it's been 15 years that have gone by since in 2008 the BBVA Foundation has set up these awards and that we are giving out to recognize and to make visible the scientific and cultural excellence at a global scale. And knowledge based on research and artistic and cultural creation, as well as an interaction between both domains, represent the key element of the work program of the BBVA Foundation since its inception. So therefore, its commitment towards improving society is very clear. in which the bank carries out its activities. And the awards that we are here to present were designed to reflect the map of knowledge in the 21st century and also to recognize the most significant contributions related to cutting-edge research in our current world. So this is why the contributions that have received awards in these 15 first editions show the extraordinary power of science and culture as engines that offer an opportunity to develop a new era and make it available to society. And we have the exploration of quantum micro world, of the development of new supermaterials and the search for new planets outside the solar system in basic sciences and even immunotherapy against cancer, or being able to cut and paste DNA sequences to repair genetic defects and the neurological elements of pain in biomedicine, and also AI, computer architecture, cryptography in ICTs, and also the key elements for growth, development and the running of markets in economy, as well as the understanding of language, cognition and rationality in humanities and social sciences, without obviously forgetting about music, of course, which is a decisive element when the time comes to configuring and defining the sensitivity of a given point in time. So 15 years after its birth, we feel very proud because these awards, the Frontiers of Knowledge, have now become an indicator of cultural scientific excellence at a global scale. At tonight's ceremony, we are celebrating the work done by 18 laureates, in other words, people who, thanks to their constance and work, have once again extended the knowledge of what is known and have reached out to very diverse areas. We are living in an era with in-depth changes, with a permanent technological disruption in many fields, and one of the most outstanding changes has to do with AI, and where there's been lots of pioneering work carried out by some of the laureates here, whose specific achievements have an enormous biomedical potential to address multiple pathologies. And other laureates have also discovered the world at a scale that used to be inaccessible in the past by providing us with extremely high-speed photography that allows us to monitor and control subatomic particles. And this makes it possible to experimentally check many phenomena that until now we could only imagine theoretically. And this opens up new frontiers in terms of quantum physics and computation, as was mentioned previously, and even in the early diagnosis of diseases. But the contributions made by another of our laureates has had a very significant impact by radically transforming the design of electronic chips and these automation techniques and tools that are essential so that each chip can contain, as was explained previously, thousands of millions of transistors that has produced a revolution in the modern semiconductor industry and has opened the door to the proliferation of all kinds of electronic devices we are using nowadays. And from the social perspective, the contributions that have received an award are very relevant, including the studies on the connections with the animal world, thanks to which we have a much better understanding of how the social environment of animals is a determining factor for their health and their survival. And several of our laureates have also made a decisive contribution as regards modeling the field of modern political economics, including the importance of institutions so that we can understand better the pillars of prosperity. And others have also offered a vision of human progress that is based on rationality, based on scientific knowledge, and they've asked us to make more progress by extending the basis of ethics to go beyond our species. And all these studies allow us to have a much better understanding of how we work as a society, an understanding that also is supported by artistic creation, in particular by music, as an ideal discipline to move the frontiers of knowledge and so that we can connect with diverse audiences. And finally, other laureates have also identified in the fossil register an important event of global heating, which serves as a reference for those for what is happening right now. And they focused on the severity of climate change and the loss of biodiversity, and both possibly are some of the biggest disruptions of our history. Challenges that the BBVA Foundation looked into and placed in the very center of its activity program more than 20 years ago, and to which we have two categories of our Frontier Awards. But we are aware of the fact that we all have to change our production model, the way we live, and we also have to change our societies. And in many instances, we will also have to develop new technologies that will help us to decarbonize the planet. And more than ever before, we must invest in the future, and we have to put our stakes on knowledge and innovation. And in order to achieve this, we have to attract lots of talent and lots of capital too. So this is not only a major challenge, but also this is an urgent issue, and governments and the private sector have a major responsibility. Public institutions should generate stability and also provide the incentives needed so that the private sector can mobilize the gigantic investments that are required to carry out this transition. And we should also articulate a global and coordinated response that is based on research, innovation, and education. And we have to support researchers like the people that are here with us tonight, because they serve as an inspiration for future scientists and artists, and they also serve as a guide for the decisions to be taken by all of our citizens. Science and culture are global activities without any kind of frontier, and with the potential of benefiting everybody. And through these awards, we have been able to make much more visible the decisive role played by research and by the way we are interpreting the world. Because knowledge, I think, is the best compass, and it's the best instrument we have at our disposal to understand the world and also understand ourselves. In other words, so that we can be rational, as one of the laureates pointed out previously. We need to have the best possible knowledge so that we can take the best decisions to achieve our goals, and therefore make the most of the present and future opportunities that our society has. And this is the basic idea of what BBVA has. We want to make available to everybody the opportunities that are offered by this new era. And in the BBVA Group, we reach out to nearly 70 million customers all over the world. And through our main activity, which has to do with loans, we are meeting their needs, both personal or related to the family or to their businesses. And this is a key role that we banks are playing in society. We are making activities dynamic, and we are mobilizing savings so that we can transform this into a productive investment, and therefore we are furthering social and economic growth by giving people loans. So the recognition that we're celebrating here tonight for the 5th consecutive year in the city of Bilbao represents, as applies to the rest of the Basque Country, the living roots of the BBVA Group. So that's why I'd like to thank you for your support and for the proximity of the authorities that are in charge of the Basque authorities. Lehendakari, the Mayor, Mr. Mayor, I'm very, very grateful for your significant support for this initiative. And there can be no better place than Bilbao. It's a city that is open to science and culture to provide a suitable framework for these awards, Frontiers of Knowledge. But I would also like to say that we have an extensive presence of the members of the jury. Thank you very much for your commitment, and thank you for striving to achieve excellence. Your rigor and independence in assessing the candidatures that have been received from some of the most important academic and research institutions of the world are the key elements that give our awards lots of prestige. And of course, many thanks to CSIC that has been working with us for more than a decade. They've been working with the BBVA Foundation in these awards and in other programs too. I'd also like to thank the Spanish scientific community that is participating in the ceremony with some of its most outstanding representatives sitting in the audience. And of course, many, many thanks to the team of Fundación BBVA that is working at an absolute level of excellence so that all of this can be carried out. And in particular, many thanks to the director, Mr. Rafael Pardo, the soul, as I said last year, he's the soul of this event, and well, we must thank him because it's well, thanks to him that we have these awards. And finally, if you will allow me to do so, I would like to speak to the laureates in English so that I can express my gratitude.
I would like to congratulate each and every one of you for your remarkable contributions. Your work is a source of inspiration for us. Your presence here today is an honor to the city of Bilbao and to the BBVA Foundation, and makes these awards even greater. Welcome to the family of the Frontiers of Knowledge awardees. Eta amaitzen dut, eskerrak emanez, bihotz-bihotzez, gaur hemen zaudeten.
And I would like to thank you all very much indeed from the bottom of my heart. So, thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, presidente Torres Vila.
Thank you, Mr. Torres Vila. And we have the honor of closing this ceremony with a speech delivered by the President of the Basque Government. It's Lehendakari, Mr. Inigo Urkullu, whom I would like to ask to please take the stage.
Legebiltzarburu Andrea, herri agintari eta
Speaker of the Basque Parliament and authorities and public representatives, Mr. Chairman of the BBVA Foundation, Madam Chair of CSIC, laureates, members of the jury, ladies and gentlemen, good evening, everybody. I'm going to try to be very brief in my presentation.
For those who visit us, please be welcome to Euskadi, to Basque Country. We hope you enjoy your stay at our marvelous country. We want you to feel like at home. Zuen etxean zaudete. Eskerrik asko ekitaldi honetara gonbidatzeagatik eta parte hartzeko aukera emateagatik. Plazerra da, benetan, hemen zuekin guztiekin egotea.
You are here at home, and it's a great honor to have you here with us. And I would like to start off by quoting Pedro Miguel Echenique, who's one of the most important scientists of our country. 40 years ago, he was the regional minister for education of the Basque government, and he's still nowadays a scientific, intellectual, and professional reference. He has lots of knowledge in the world without frontiers, and in fact science is like a collective work of art. It's the outcome of something that in the Basque country we called ausolana, which means that this is like a collaborative effort that is carried out to benefit our common goals, because it is through by joining our forces and by working in a team, that's when we make most progress. And it's very clear in our mind that whatever happened in the past, it was completely different. Our quality of life cannot be compared to the quality of life that our predecessors enjoyed many years ago. We are surviving longer nowadays, and we are living better. Well, possibly we will have to forget about the difficulties and uncertainties that are affecting us so that we can conclude that, yes, that is the case. We have achieved this to a large extent thanks to science. And it is true that scientific knowledge and that the knowledge of society are operating at different speeds, although we will face a major danger if we just consider that this is all right. So it's fundamental to put across all of the progress that is made. This has to be reported to our citizens, because everybody, all us men and women, must understand how important science is. Knowledge makes us more free, makes us less vulnerable too. So what we should do is focus all of our efforts on teaching and disseminating. This is what institutions and researchers have to do. We have to bring science closer to people out on the streets, to people, to our citizens. And if we want to live in a knowledge-based society, our obligation is, what we have to do is put our stakes on the people that generate this knowledge, because in the Basque Country we have talent. We certainly do have talent here. And we should be able to retain this talent and also promote it. And this doesn't mean that people that have received this sort of training, doesn't mean that they should never leave our country, or a researcher should be able to share and improve his or her performance. And this is indispensable in any kind of continuous improvement and learning process, although we have to be able to create the necessary conditions so that those people that do leave will be able to come back and also have the possibility of developing their professional and personal lives here in the Basque Country. But in any case, without imposing any frontiers on knowledge, nor imposing any limitations. So knowledge and excellence will always be the trademark of our country. In the Basque Country, what we're doing is we are fostering university grants so that your financial situation does not pose any impediments for you to go to university. And we've also approved the pre-doctoral and post-doctoral mechanisms and grants, with excellence and internationalization as two fundamental goals. So training abroad is one of the requirements that we are supporting, and we are giving it lots of financial support too. So as I was pointing out before, the Governing Council has approved the university grants as well as more financial support for postdoc studies, and that is that internationalization and excellence are absolutely indispensable conditions. And all of us want to subsidize training abroad. So we are all aware of how important science is for our lives. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for having organized this awards-giving ceremony for another year. Thank you very much for working in favor of the dissemination of science, because you are absolutely indispensable in this work you're doing. Thank you very much, and congratulations for all of those people that have received an award, because thanks to their work, our quality of life is better than ever before, and we feel safer nowadays, because thanks to their contributions, future generations will lead much better lives than we are living now. Thank you very much.
Mila esker, lehendakari jauna.
Thank you very much, Lehendakari Urkullu. We would like to thank the Basque institutions and all the citizens of this incomparable city and of the Basque Country as a whole. Also to the rector of the University of the Basque Country, to the rectors and governing teams of some of our best universities, and to the distinguished guests from numerous fields of research, medicine, business, the media, art and music, as well as from other institutions. The guests, and I mean all of you, are an essential component of this ceremony celebrating knowledge. Special thanks again to the juries and the nominating institutions, without whose contribution these awards wouldn't be possible. I would now ask you to remain in your seats for a couple of minutes more whilst the laureates and members of the jury, the presidency and the authorities now leave the room. Please give them all a round of applause.
Miembros del jurado.
Members of the jury.
miembros de jurados,
Sorry, the members of the juries.
Presidencia, Presidencia,
Presidency.
y autoridades.
And authorities.
A continuación se servirá un cóctel en el que podremos felicitar personalmente a los premiados. Esperamos reunirnos nuevamente con ustedes el próximo año para celebrar la 16ª edición de los Premios Fronteras del Conocimiento.
16th Frontiers of Knowledge Awards. Thank you so much. See you again soon.